The great chamber of the Galactic Council stretched upward like a frozen waterfall of crystalline light. 12 thrones sat in a perfect circle, each one carved from materials found only on the homeworlds of the ruling species. For 3,000 years, this room had decided the fate of every living thing in the galaxy. Today, it would decide the fate of humanity. Ambassador Alina Vasquez stood in the center of the circle, her simple black uniform looking almost plain against the jeweled splendor around her. She was 62 years old, the gray streaks in her dark hair and lines on her face that spoke of decades spent fighting for her people. Behind her stood 300 years of human service to the Council. 300 years of blood, sacrifice, and broken promises. "The matter before us is simple," announced High Speaker Valtharion, his bioluminescent frills pulsing with soft blue light. He was ancient even by Velkari standards, and his species had been ruling the galaxy since before humans learned to make fire. The human delegation requests permanent membership in the Council of 12. They wish to become a governing species. A ripple of amusement passed through the chamber. The Kreth representative, a massive creature of armored plates and clicking mandibles, made a sound that might have been laughter. The Silithian delegate, whose body flowed like living silver, shifted in what Alina had learned to recognize as contempt. She kept her face calm. She had expected this. "We have served the Council faithfully for 3 centuries, Alina said, her voice steady and clear. "Human soldiers have died in every border war since we joined the galactic community. Human engineers maintain the transit gates that connect your empires. Human colonists settled the dangerous worlds that no other species would touch. We have earned this seat." High Speaker Valtharion's frills flickered with false sympathy. "And we are grateful for your service, Ambassador. Truly. But the Council of 12 has governed this galaxy for 3,000 years. The species who sit here have proven themselves over millennia. Humanity is young, impetuous. Your entire recorded history is barely a heartbeat compared to ours." Alina felt the familiar burn of anger in her chest, but she pushed it down. She had played this game before. "Then give us a timeline. Tell us what we must do to earn our place." The 12 representatives exchanged glances. Some looked uncomfortable. Others looked amused. The Kreth representative clicked his mandibles with obvious pleasure. "Perhaps in another 1,000 years," Valtharion said, "humanity will be ready for such responsibility." Lena stared at him. 1,000 years? Her species had only been traveling among the stars for 500. They were asking humanity to wait twice that long, to continue serving without voice or vote, to bleed and build for species that would never see them as equals. "I must consult with my government," she said quietly. "I request a recess." Valtharion waved a long-fingered hand. "Of course. We will expect your response tomorrow." Lena bowed and walked out of the chamber. She did not look back. That night, she sat alone in the human embassy, staring out at the alien city that sprawled beneath the purple sky of the Council homeworld. Her communication device lay silent on the desk beside her. She had already sent her report to Earth. She had already received her orders. For the first time in 300 years, humanity was going to say no. The next morning, Alina returned to the Council chamber. The 12 representatives watched her with the patient condescension of immortal beings observing a child's tantrum. They expected her to negotiate, to beg, to ask for 200 years instead of 1,000, as if that made any difference. Instead, she simply said, "The United Human Collective has reviewed your offer. We decline." Valtharion's frills pulsed with confusion. "You decline? Ambassador, there's nothing to decline. We have made no offer. We have simply stated that humanity is not ready for—" "We are leaving," Alina interrupted. She had never interrupted a council member before. The shock in the room was electric, effective immediately. All human military personnel are withdrawing from council space. All human engineers will cease maintenance on council infrastructure. All human colonists will evacuate their settlements. We are done. The Kreth representative rose from his throne, his armored body creaking with outrage. "You cannot simply leave. You have treaties, obligations." "We fulfilled every obligation," Alina replied calmly. "We fought your wars. We built your gates. We settled your dangerous worlds. And in return, You gave us nothing but contempt and broken promises." She looked around the circle, meeting the eyes of each representative. "Find someone else to do your dirty work. Where will you go?" The Silithian delegate asked, genuine curiosity in its flowing voice. "Every habitable system is claimed. Every colony world belongs to one council species or another." Lena smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. The void expanse. Silence fell over the chamber like a physical weight. The void expanse was the galaxy's graveyard, a region of dead stars and impossible spatial anomalies that had swallowed every expedition sent to explore it. Ancient species had lost entire fleets trying to chart its depths. Modern civilizations had simply learned to stay away. "That is suicide," Valtharion said softly. "The void expanse has killed millions." "Then you have nothing to worry about," Elena replied. "We will trouble you no more." She turned and walked out of the chamber for the last time. Within 72 hours, the great exodus began. Human cargo ships loaded with supplies and equipment streamed toward the outer rim. Military frigates fell into formation around vulnerable transports. Colony ships, some of them barely spaceworthy, joined the convoy. Research stations that had orbited council worlds for decades packed up their equipment and followed. The council watched in disbelief. They had expected protests, negotiations, perhaps a small faction of radicals attempting to cause trouble. Instead, they watched humanity disappear. 20 billion people, 47 colony worlds, 300 years of history, all of it flowing toward the darkness at the edge of the galaxy. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the colony ship New Hope, watching the stars of council space grow smaller behind them. Around her, the bridge crew worked in tense silence. Ahead of them lay nothing but the unknown. "Do you think they will come after us?" Harade asked quietly. Elena shook her head. "They will assume we are dead within a year. They will forget about us within a decade." She paused, watching the first dark clouds of the void expanse appear on the view screen. "And that is exactly what we are counting on." The New Hope accelerated into the darkness, and humanity vanished from the galaxy that had never wanted them. Behind them, the council returned to its comfortable routines, confident that the human problem had solved itself. They did not know that they had just made the greatest mistake in galactic history. They did not know that, in the darkness ahead, humanity would find something ancient, wonderful, and terrible. They did not know that everything was about to change. 40 years passed in council space, and the galaxy slowly began to fall apart. At first, no one noticed the cracks. The council was old and powerful, and its systems had been running smoothly for 3,000 years. Surely they could survive without one minor species. Surely humans had not been that important. They were wrong. The first problems appeared in the military. Human soldiers had always been the ones willing to serve on the dangerous frontier, to fight in the ugly little wars that kept the Kreth hegemony from expanding too aggressively. Without them, the frontier grew quiet for a few years. Then it grew dangerous. Kreth raiders began testing the borders, striking at isolated outposts and fleeing before council reinforcements could arrive. The Valkyrie sent their own soldiers to replace the humans, but the Valkyrie were scholars and diplomats, not warriors. They died in embarrassing numbers. The Silithians were excellent fighters, but their liquid bodies could not survive in the cold vacuum of space combat. One by one, the other council species discovered why humans had always been the ones sent to die on the frontier. Then the transit gates began to fail. The gates were ancient technology, built by a species that had vanished long before the council existed. No one truly understood how they worked. For 3,000 years, council engineers had maintained them through careful observation and conservative repairs. But humans had been the ones who actually kept them running. Human engineers had a strange gift for understanding machines, for coaxing ancient systems back to life through intuition and stubbornness. Without them, the gates began to break down. First one, then a dozen, then hundreds. Trade routes that had connected empires for millennia suddenly went dark. Planets that depended on imports began to starve. The economy of the galaxy, which had seemed so eternal and stable, started to crumble. High Speaker Valtharion, now ancient beyond measure, watched the reports pile up on his desk with growing despair. He had been so certain that humanity's departure would mean nothing. He had been so confident that the Council could survive without them. He had been so terribly wrong, but the worst was yet to come. The first reports came from the Outer Rim, from systems so distant that most Council citizens had never heard of them. Strange ships had appeared on the edge of known space. Ships made of living tissue. Ships that moved in swarms of millions. Ships that consumed everything in their path. The Devourer swarm had arrived. No one knew where they came from. Some believed they had always existed in the dark spaces between galaxies, waiting for the right moment to feed. Others thought they were a weapon left behind by some ancient war. It did not matter. What mattered was that they were hungry. The galaxy was their meal. The Council responded with all the force it could gather. 400,000 warships from 12 species assembled at the Hellion Barrier, the most defensible position in known space. Behind them lay the core worlds, the ancient homeworlds of the ruling species. If the barrier held, the galaxy might survive. The battle lasted 6 hours. Admiral Cathpharon of the Velkari Navy watched from his flagship as wave after wave of swarm bioships crashed against his fleet. They were not individual vessels, he realized with growing horror. They were cells in a single vast organism, coordinated by an intelligence that spanned trillions of bodies. For every ship his weapons destroyed, 10 more took its place. By the 4th hour, half his fleet was gone. By the 5th hour, the barrier had collapsed. By the 6th hour, the surviving ships were fleeing in disorder, and the swarm was consuming the first of the core worlds. Admiral Cathpharon died when his flagship was overwhelmed by boarding organisms. His last transmission was a simple message to the Council: "We cannot win this war. Find another way." 17 inhabited systems fell in the first month, then 30 more. The swarm moved through Council space like fire through dry grass, leaving nothing but empty rocks and dead stars behind. The Council met in emergency session, but their chamber felt empty now. Half the representatives were dead. The survivors argued about retreat, about surrender, about desperate last stands that everyone knew would fail. It was the young Velkari delegate Kelvith who finally spoke the words that no one wanted to. "Here, we need the humans." Silence fell over the chamber. The older representatives looked away in shame. The younger ones stared at Kelvith as if he had suggested negotiating with the swarm itself. "They are dead," said the Silithian delegate, flatly. "They flew into the void expanse 40 years ago. Nothing survives there." "We do not know that," Kelvith replied. "We have detected anomalies on the edge of the expanse. Strange signals. Impossible energy readings. Something is alive in there." "Even if they survived," another delegate said, "why would they help us? We rejected them. We humiliated them. We drove them away." Kelvith's frills pulsed with pain. His grandfather had been the High Speaker who denied humanity their seat. His family had carried that shame for 4 decades. "Because they are human," he said quietly, "and in 300 years of watching them, I learned one thing about humanity. They cannot help but care about others, even those who have hurt them." The vote was quick and desperate. Kelvith would take a single ship into the void expanse. He would find the humans, if any still lived. He would beg them to return. The night before he left, Kelvith stood on the observation deck of the Council station. Watching the distant flash of the swarm consuming another world, the galaxy was dying around him. His own species might be extinct within a year, and humanity, if they had somehow survived, was their only hope. His ship was small and fast, designed for exploration rather than combat. It crossed the border of the void expanse at maximum speed, plunging into the darkness that had swallowed so many expeditions before. Kelvith expected death. He expected the crushing gravity of collapsed stars, the reality-tearing force of spatial anomalies, the silent cold of a region where even light seemed to die. Instead, he found something impossible. Where dead stars should have hung cold and dark, there was light. blazing brilliant light from suns that should not exist. Planets that should have been frozen rocks were green and blue and full of life. And everywhere there were ships. Human ships. Millions of them. Ships of designs he had never seen, moving at speeds that should have been impossible, filling the once dead region with the bustle of a thriving civilization. Kelvith stared at his sensors in disbelief. Humanity had not merely survived. They had built something magnificent. His communication system crackled to life, and a calm human voice filled his bridge. "Velkar vessel, you have entered human Concord space. State your purpose." Kelvith took a deep breath. The fate of the galaxy rested on what he said next. "My name is Kelvith of the Velkari. I have come to beg for humanity's help. The galaxy is dying, and you are our only hope." The silence stretched for a long moment. Then the voice returned with a hint of something that might have been sad amusement. "Follow the navigation beacon. Someone will meet with you shortly." The beacon appeared on his screen, guiding him deeper into the impossible light. Behind him, the galaxy burned. Ahead of him lay the only chance of salvation. Kelvith followed the light and prayed that humanity had not forgotten how to forgive. The planet beneath Kelvith's ship was impossible. It should not exist. According to every map in Council archives, this region of space contained nothing but a dead star and the frozen rocks that orbited it. Instead, he saw a world covered in forests and oceans and cities that sparkled like diamonds in the light of a sun that had somehow been reborn. His escort vessels, sleek, elegant ships that moved through space with a grace that made Council technology look clumsy, guided him down through the atmosphere. As he descended, he saw more details. Fields of crops stretching to the horizon, rivers that flowed with clear blue water, children playing in parks while their parents watched from nearby benches. Humanity had not just survived, they had built paradise. The landing platform was simple and clean. Made of some white material that seemed to glow faintly in the afternoon light, a small group of humans waited for him there. Dressed in practical clothing that reminded Kelvith of the workers and engineers he had known in Council space. But there was something different about them. A calmness, a quiet confidence that seemed to radiate from every gesture. An older woman stepped forward as Kelvith descended from his ship. Her hair was white, her face lined with age, but her eyes were sharp and clear. "Welcome to New Geneva," she said, in perfect Velkari, without any translation device. "My name is Director Sarah Chen. I will take you to meet the Concord Council." Kelvith bowed in the formal Velkari manner. "I am honored. And I must say, I am astonished. We believed this region was death itself. How did you survive?" Sarah smiled, a gentle expression that held decades of memory. "The void expanse was never what you thought it was. Come, we have much to discuss. And I imagine you have many questions." She led him through the city, and Kelvith found himself staring like a child at everything he saw. The buildings were tall and graceful, but they did not look like they had been built. They looked like they had grown, their walls smooth and organic. Trees lined every street, their leaves rustling in a warm breeze that smelled of flowers and clean water. "How many humans live here now?" he asked, in the Concord. "About 40 billion spread across 237 worlds." Sarah glanced at his shocked expression and smiled again. "We had time, and we learned things out here that the Council never imagined." "What things?" Sarah paused at a crosswalk, waiting for a group of children to pass. They laughed and waved at Kelvith, apparently unfazed by the sight of an alien in their city. "The void expanse was not empty," Sarah said quietly. "It was not dead. It was sleeping. The spatial anomalies that killed your expeditions were not random accidents. They were guardians. Protectors of something ancient and wonderful that had been waiting for someone brave enough to say hello." Kelvith felt a chill run down his spine. What was waiting? You will see. The Concord Council met in a building that looked more like a garden than a government center. Flowering vines covered the walls, and a stream ran through the middle of the main chamber, its soft burbling creating a peaceful background noise. Around a simple wooden table sat 12 humans, representing the different regions of their new civilization. At the head of the table, sat a man who looked barely 40. With dark hair going gray at the temples and eyes that held a depth Kelvith had only seen in the most ancient Velkari elders. But according to council records, this man should have been over 80 years old. "Ambassador Kelvith," the man said, rising to greet him. "I am Marcus Chen, Director General of the Human Concord. Sarah is my grandmother, if you were wondering about the shared name." Kelvith bowed. "Director General, I come bearing a desperate message from the Galactic Council. Our civilization is dying. A force called the Devourer Swarm has emerged from beyond the galaxy, and we cannot stop them. 17 systems have already fallen. We need your help." Marcus nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "We know about the swarm. We have been watching them for some time." "Then you know that the galaxy is doomed without intervention?" "Yes." Kelvith waited for more, but Marcus simply sat back in his chair and studied him with those impossibly deep eyes. The silence stretched on. "Will you help us?" Kelvith finally asked. "I know we have no right to ask. I know what the council did to you. My own grandfather was the one who denied your people their seat. But there are billions of innocent people who had nothing to do with those decisions. Children who do not deserve to be consumed by monsters." Marcus exchanged glances with the other council members. Something passed between them, some communication that Kelvith could not follow. "Let me show you something," Marcus said. He stood and walked to the stream that ran through the chamber. "Come here." Kelvith joined him at the water's edge. Marcus knelt and dipped his hand into the stream. The water began to glow with soft golden light, and shapes formed in its surface, images of stars and planets, ships and structures. "When we first entered the void expanse, we were desperate and afraid," Marcus said. "We had burned every bridge behind us. We had nowhere else to go. So we kept pushing forward into regions that should have killed us." The images shifted, showing human ships navigating through terrifying fields of twisted space. "The anomalies attacked us at first. We lost ships. We lost people. But we noticed something strange. The attacks were not random. They were tests. Something was watching us, evaluating us." More images. Humans reaching out to strange patterns of light and energy. "It took us 10 years to learn how to communicate with them. The Void Dwellers, we call them now. They are not like any life form the Council has ever encountered. They exist in the spaces between dimensions, in the fabric of reality itself. They have been here since before the first stars were born." Kelvith stared at the glowing images in disbelief. "They are alive." "The anomalies. More than alive, they are intelligent, ancient, and very, very powerful." Marcus looked up at him. "They were waiting for someone who would treat them as friends rather than obstacles to be conquered. Someone curious enough to try to understand them rather than just using them. We were the first species in galactic history to pass their test, and in return, they shared their knowledge with us. They helped us reignite dead stars. They taught us to heal broken worlds. They showed us secrets of space and time that the Council's scientists cannot even imagine." Marcus stood, water dripping from his fingers. "The Void Dwellers are our allies now, our friends, and they are very unhappy about what the swarm is doing to the galaxy." Kelvith's mind raced with the implications. You could have returned at any time. You could have demanded revenge. With power like this, you could have conquered the entire council. Marcus smiled. And for a moment, Kelvith saw something of the stubborn determination that had driven humanity to walk into the darkness rather than accept humiliation. "We thought about it," Marcus admitted. "In the early years, there were many who wanted to go back and make the council pay for what they did to us. But we realized something as we built our new civilization. Revenge would have made us exactly what the council always believed. We were violent, impulsive, unable to rise above our primitive nature." He walked back to the table and sat down heavily. "We wanted to prove them wrong. We wanted to show that humanity was better than that. So we waited. We built. We grew." He met Kelvith's eyes. "And now you have come to us, asking for help. Not demanding, asking, will you give it?" Marcus looked around at his fellow council members. One by one, They nodded. "Yes," he said, "we will help. Not because you deserve it. Not because the Council has earned our forgiveness. We will help because there are innocent billions who will die if we do not. We will help because that is who we choose to be." Kelvith felt tears forming in his eyes, a reaction he had not experienced since childhood. "Thank you. Thank you." Marcus stood and extended his hand in the human gesture of agreement. "Return to the Council. Tell them we are coming. Tell them that humanity remembers what it means to protect those who cannot protect themselves." Kelvith took his hand and shook it firmly. "Tell them," Marcus continued, his eyes suddenly fierce, "that the swarm has never faced anything like us, and they never will again." Swarm had consumed 53 systems by the time the darkness at the edge of the galaxy began to glow. Admiral Velkorath of the Silithian fleet had been preparing for a final stand at the Meridian system, the last major defense point before the core worlds. His forces were exhausted, depleted, and terrified. They had watched the swarm devour world after world, and they knew that nothing they possessed could stop it. This battle would be their last. Then his sensors detected something impossible, Admiral, his tactical officer said, his liquid voice trembling with confusion. "We are reading massive energy signatures emerging from the void expanse. Thousands of them. No, millions." Velkorath stared at the display in disbelief. The void expanse had been dark and silent for as long as records existed. Nothing came out of that region. Nothing ever had. Until now. The first ships emerged like dawn breaking over a dark horizon. They were beautiful in a way that made council vessels look like children's toys. Sleek and graceful, they seemed to flow through space rather than simply moving through it. Their hulls shimmered with colors that had no names, and their engines burned with light that felt almost alive. But the ships were not the most terrifying thing. Behind them came the Void Dwellers. They were not creatures in any sense. That Velkorath understood. They were tiers in reality itself, patches of space where the normal rules simply did not apply. Some looked like geometric shapes that hurt to observe directly. Others resembled storms of pure light that flickered between dimensions. Still others were simply absences. Gaps in existence where something should have been, but was not. And they moved with the human fleet like wolves running alongside hunters. The communication channels exploded with overlapping transmissions. Council ships were reporting the impossible readings, demanding explanations, panicking at the sight of the alien reinforcements. Then a calm human voice cut through the chaos. "This is Director General Marcus Chen of the Human Concord to all Council forces. We are here to help. Fall back to secondary positions and allow us to engage the swarm directly. Do not fire on our allied entities. They are friends." Velkorath felt something he had not experienced in months of desperate fighting. "Hope. All ships fall back," he ordered. "Give the humans room to work." The human fleet moved forward with terrifying speed, crossing distances that should have taken hours in mere minutes. They did not fly through space, they seemed to fold it around themselves, appearing and disappearing in ways that broke every law of physics Velkorath knew. The swarm, which had swept through Council defenses like a flood through dry land, actually paused. For the first time in the entire war, the hive mind seemed uncertain. Then the battle began. Human weapons did not fire energy beams or physical projectiles. They fired something else entirely, pulses of force that seemed to attack the very fabric of reality around the swarm bioships. Where the pulses struck, swarm vessels simply came apart, their molecular bonds dissolving as if they had forgotten how to hold together. But the Void Dwellers were even more devastating. They flowed through the swarm fleet like predators through a school of fish. The spatial anomalies that had terrified Council explorers for millennia now turned their terrible power against the invaders. Bioships that crossed their path were torn apart by gravity wells that appeared and vanished in heartbeats. Others were crushed by dimensions folding in on themselves. Still others simply disappeared, swallowed by gaps in reality that closed behind them like hungry mouths. The swarm tried to adapt. It was ancient and intelligent, and it had consumed civilizations far older than the Council. Its trillion bodies shifted and reorganized, developing new strategies, new forms. New weapons? None of them worked. Human ships danced around swarm attacks with impossible grace, their pilots seeming to know where enemy fire would strike before it was launched. The Void Dwellers ignored the swarm's weapons' entirely energy. Beams and biological projectiles passed through them without effect, striking nothing but empty space. For 3 days, the battle raged across the Meridian system. Council observers watched in stunned amazement as humanity did what the entire galaxy had failed to do. They pushed the swarm back. On the bridge of his flagship, Marcus Chen stood calmly amid the controlled chaos of war. Around him, human officers coordinated with Void Dweller allies through interfaces that looked more like meditation than communication. Holographic displays showed the battle from 1,000 angles, tracking the flow of combat with precision that no Council tactician could match. "The Swarm Queen is attempting to retreat," reported his tactical officer. "She is pulling her consciousness back toward the core bodies." Marcus nodded. "Do not let her escape. If she survives, she will learn from this. She will return stronger." The human fleet surged forward, cutting off escape routes with surgical precision. The Void Dwellers spread across space like a net, sealing the gaps that the swarm tried to flee through. For the first time in its ancient existence, the Swarm Queen experienced fear. She was a consciousness distributed across 1 billion bodies. A mind that had existed since before the galaxy's first civilizations had risen and fallen. She had consumed species beyond counting, absorbed their knowledge, added their biological distinctiveness to her own. She had believed herself invincible. Now she understood that she had been wrong. The humans were not like the species she had devoured before. They did not fight with desperation or rage. They fought with cold precision and absolute confidence. And the things that fought alongside them, the Void Dwellers, were older than she was. Far older. They remembered when the universe was young, when the first stars ignited in the primordial darkness. They had waited patiently for billions of years, and now they had found partners worthy of their terrible power. The Swarm Queen made a decision that she had never made before. She surrendered. The transmission went out across all frequencies, in all languages, to every corner of the galaxy. The Swarm Queen, the ancient horror that had threatened to consume all life, was asking for terms. Marcus Chen received the message with no visible emotion. He had expected this. The Void Dwellers had told him that the swarm was not truly evil-lit, was simply hungry. A biological imperative taken to cosmic extremes. Given another option, it might choose differently. "You wish to surrender?" he said, his voice broadcast to the listening galaxy. The Swarm Queen's response came in broken. Halting words, pieced together from the languages of species she had consumed. "We have never been defeated. We have never known fear. You have taught us both. We do not wish to die. Then you must change. You must learn to take only what is freely given, not what you can steal. You must learn to coexist rather than consume." A long pause. The entire galaxy held its breath. "We do not know how." Marcus smiled slightly. "Then we will teach you. As we were taught." He looked out at the frozen battlefield, at the shattered remains of swarm bioships floating among human vessels and Void Dweller entities. Behind him, Council observers were already transmitting this conversation to every corner of known space. "The war is over," he announced. "The swarm has surrendered. All hostilities are to cease immediately." In the Council chamber, representatives wept with relief. On 1,000 worlds, billions of beings looked up at the sky and dared to believe that they might survive. And in the heart of the void expanse, the ancient entities who had watched over creation since its birth observed their new partners with something like pride. Humanity had passed every test. They had faced extinction and refused to become extinct. They had been betrayed and refused to seek revenge. They had gained power beyond imagination and chosen to use it for protection rather than conquest. The Void Dwellers had waited a very long time for such friends. They were glad the wait was over. 1 year after the swarm's surrender, The galaxy gathered on a world that should not have existed. New Geneva had been a frozen rock orbiting a dead star. When humanity first arrived in the void expanse, now it was a paradise of forests and oceans and mountains that seemed to touch the sky. The sun that warmed its surface had been reignited through technologies that the Council could not begin to understand. The air that filled its atmosphere had been crafted molecule by molecule. It was a monument to what humanity had become during their years of exile. And today, it would become something more. Representatives from every species in the known galaxy filed into the Grand Assembly Hall, a structure that seemed to grow from the living rock of the mountain it sat upon. There were Valkyrie and Silithians, Kreth, and dozens of other Council species. But there were also others, representatives from worlds that the Council had conquered or ignored. Species that had never been given a voice in galactic affairs. Survivors of civilizations that had almost been destroyed by the Swarm. Even the Swarm was represented. A small delegation of beings that had once been mindless drones now walked with careful, uncertain steps among their former prey. They were learning slowly what it meant to be individuals rather than cells in a cosmic monster. The hall was vast. It's designed to hold thousands of delegates, but it did not feel cold or impersonal. Gardens grew between the seating areas. Streams ran through channels carved into the floor. Light filtered through crystal skylights in colors that seemed to shift with the mood of the room. At the center of it all stood a simple podium, and behind it sat 12 empty chairs. The old Council of 12 had dissolved in the aftermath of the Swarm War. Its members had been too humiliated, too discredited, to continue leading. The systems they had failed to protect demanded change. The species they had neglected demanded justice. Humanity could have claimed leadership. They had the power, the technology, the alliance with the Void Dwellers. No one in the galaxy could have stopped them from simply taking control. Instead, it proposed something unprecedented. Director General Marcus Chen walked to the podium with slow, measured steps. He was older now, his hair fully gray, his face lined with the weight of years and decisions. But his eyes still held that strange depth, that quiet patience that came from having faced the darkness and found light within it. 140 years ago, he began, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. Humanity came to the stars full of hope and wonder. We wanted to explore. We wanted to learn. We wanted to find our place among the great civilizations of the galaxy. He paused, looking out at the assembled delegates. For 300 years, we served faithfully. We fought wars we did not start. We built infrastructure we would never own. We settled dangerous worlds so that others could live in comfort. And when we asked for a seat at the table where our fate was decided, we were told to wait another 1,000 years. Silence filled the hall. Many of the older delegates looked away in shame. We could have stayed and continued to beg for acceptance. We could have given up and resigned ourselves to permanent servitude. Instead, we chose a third option. We walked into the darkness that everyone told us would kill us, and we found something wonderful waiting there. Behind him, through the great windows of the hall, the reborn sun of New Geneva burned with golden light. The Void Dwellers taught us many things during our years of exile. They taught us how to heal dead worlds and reignite dying stars. They taught us secrets of space and time that your scientists cannot imagine. But the most important thing they taught us was this: power means nothing without wisdom, and wisdom comes only from understanding what truly matters. He gestured to the empty chairs behind him. The old Council of 12 claimed to represent the galaxy. In truth, it represented only those who had conquered and held power through force. It ignored the voices of the weak, the different, the forgotten. That is why it failed. That is why the Swarm nearly destroyed us all. Marcus stepped back from the podium and turned to face the empty chairs. Today, we propose something new. Not a Council of 12, but a Galactic Assembly. Not a gathering of the powerful, but a forum where every voice can be heard. Every species, no matter how young or old, will have representatives here. Every world, no matter how small or remote, will have a vote. No one will be told to wait 1,000 years to have their concerns addressed. He turned back to the assembled delegates. Humanity will not lead this assembly. We will not claim special privileges because of our power or our alliance with the Void Dwellers. We will take our place as one voice among many, equal to the smallest species represented here. That is how it should be. That is the only way this can work. A murmur ran through the hall. This was not what many had expected. They had assumed that humanity would demand control, would use their victory to claim the dominance that the old council had denied them. Kelvith, who had become the unofficial spokesman for the Valkyrie since his journey to the Void Expanse, rose from his seat. Director General Chen, I must speak. Marcus nodded. The floor recognizes Ambassador Kelvith. Kelvith walked to the front of the hall, his frills pulsing with emotion. He was much older now, and his steps were slower, but his voice was strong and clear. 41 years ago, my grandfather stood in the council chamber and denied humanity its rightful place. He told your ambassador that your species was too young, too impetuous, too primitive to be trusted with power. He was wrong. He was terribly, shamefully wrong. Kelvith turned to face the assembly. I have seen what humanity built in the darkness that we assumed would kill them. I have walked through their gardens and their cities. I have watched them show mercy to enemies that we would have exterminated without thought, and I have seen them refuse the revenge that they had every right to take. His voice trembled. The Valkyrie are an ancient species. We have watched civilizations rise and fall for 3,000 years. We believed that wisdom came with age, that time alone could teach the lessons that matter. But humanity has shown us that we were wrong. You have shown that wisdom comes not from years lived, but from choices made, and you have chosen better than we ever did. He bowed deeply. In the most formal gesture of respect his species possessed, on behalf of the Valkyrie people, I ask your forgiveness for the wrongs we have done you, and I pledge that we will support this galactic assembly with everything we have. One by one, other delegates rose to make similar statements. The Silithians acknowledged their arrogance. The Kreth admitted their aggression. Even the Swarm delegation, in halting words, expressed gratitude for being given a chance to become something better than they had been. When the last speech was finished, Marcus Chun returned to the podium. The galaxy has endured much in recent years. We have faced extinction and survived. We have learned that the old ways of power and conquest lead only to destruction. Today we begin a new chapter. He looked out at the assembled delegates, at the representatives of hundreds of species who had come together in hope rather than fear. The Galactic Assembly is now in session, and every single one of you belongs here. The vote to establish the assembly was unanimous. Later that evening, after the ceremonies were finished and the delegates had dispersed to their quarters, Marcus Chen stood alone in the garden outside the assembly hall. The artificial sun had set, and the sky was filled with stars, some natural, some reignited by human technology, all of them beautiful. A young journalist approached him carefully. She was Valkyrie, barely out of childhood by her species standards, and she clutched her recording device nervously. Director General, I was hoping I could ask you a question for my report. Marcus smiled gently. Of course, do you ever regret leaving? Do you ever wonder what might have happened if humanity had stayed in council space and kept fighting for acceptance? Marcus considered the question for a long moment, looking up at the impossible stars. The council wanted us to beg for scraps from their table. They wanted us to be grateful for whatever crumbs they chose to give us. If we had stayed, we might have eventually earned our seat. In 1,000 years, or 2,000, they might have finally accepted us. He shook his head slowly. But we would not have been the same. We would have learned to be patient in the wrong way, patient, like someone waiting for permission, not patient like someone building something wonderful. We would have learned to accept limits instead of breaking them. He gestured at the garden around them, at the impossible world beneath their feet, at the stars that burned with reborn light. When humanity forsook the council, everything changed. But not just for the galaxy. For us most of all. We learned what we were truly capable of when we stopped asking for permission and started building our own future. The journalist recorded his words carefully, sensing that she was capturing something important. And what do you hope humanity will do with that knowledge? Now that you have power beyond anything the galaxy has seen? Marcus smiled again and there was something ancient and wise and humble in his expression. We will keep building. We will keep learning. We will keep helping those who need help. And we will never ever forget what it felt like to be rejected and alone in the darkness. He looked at her kindly, because that is how we found the light. He walked away, leaving the journalist standing in the garden of a world that should not exist. Built by a species that had refused to be forgotten. Above her, the stars burned with the light of human determination, and somewhere in the vast depths of space, the void dwellers watched over their friends with patient love, glad that they had finally found a species worthy of the wonders they had protected for so long. The galaxy had changed forever, and this was only the beginning.